This time I will bring a story, the biggest robbery case, which happened in America, which is called with Lufthansa Heist. And Lufthansa itself, it's an airline name. And this is what happened in 1978. And why it's so big? Because it's money that's stolen. It's worth about $6 million US. Or equivalent in year 2016, it is about $23 million US. After watching this case, you can watch the movie. The film is titled Goodfellas. Old movie too, played by cool actors too. There's Robert De Niro, there is Ray Liotta is good enough, at representing cases this Lufthansa heist. Sadism, everyone it is there. Why is this the case interesting? First, because the biggest, and second is, how is the process of the mafias in behind this Lufthansa heist doing method, which is quite crazy, to the people who related to this Lufthansa heist robbery, or the members who actually did this robbery. Later I break down one by one, how happened, and before that please click share and subscribe for sure, to support this channel, and also make sure to turn on the bell, let's not miss. The Lufthansa heist. The biggest robbery ever, happening in America, with the tempo super fast and super robbery perfect too, and managed to get $6 million US. What I said earlier, its equivalent in 2019, is $23 million US, which in the end it is indeed a robbery, very bloody in the process. This robbery took place in the 70s, the place is 1978, and indeed the 70s to 80s crazy era madness and glory of the Italy mafias in America, especially in New York, which is history in that era. Also, according to history, there are also 5 family names recorded, as big mafias that is in power in that era. There's De Bonanno, Colombo, Gambino, Genovese and Lucchese, who share power, for can still live in harmony in the process Italian mafia castle. And all the family this is behind almost all actions crime in New York. All illegal business New York, it must have one of those names listed family, in a black business in New York. For Lufthansa heist itself. This is the action of part of the Lucchese family, or more correctly relatives of Lucchese. That is Jimmy Burke, who became the mastermind, of the largest robbery in America. He really is the brain of the very great value operation. In short, Jimmy since he was little, he has been living in orphanage, and in his childhood, he have also experienced the name sexual abuse many times, from adoptive parents. And at the time, when he was young, he also mutilated people, who annoys his wife, cut into pieces his body, then all the bodies are entered to this guy's car. And the police found his body already dismembered. So finally he was his youth, spent time crawling in the mafia organization. Recommended by a person named Paul Vario, who become his friend. Who is indeed a real Italian, because it's for someone who isn't Italian, and indeed this Jimmy Burke is Irish, so to be able to associate himself with the organization, needs a real Italian or made man to be able to recommend him. That's recommended by Paul Vario, and finally he can be associate from Lutska family. Because he is not a made man, so have flexibility or free agent, so it can be right and left actually. It's just but he is more loyal, to doing field work from the Lucchese family. Besides being associate of the Lucchese family, He also has a lounge or a bar, called Robert's Lounge, in the Ozone Park area, which is indeed a meeting point for criminals or mafias to be able to lobbying or doing anything the name of illegal transactions. It can be said that one night, Jimmy Burke's friend or associate, named Henry Hill, who was his close friend also, meet his friend named Martin Krugman. On that meeting, Martin Krugman that provide information regarding the existence of $6 million, which saved and indeed is money or untraceable treasure, which is easy to stolen, he said. This Martin Krugman explained further, that there is a large storage vault, which is stored at the Lufthansa Airlines terminal, at JFK Airport, which is already in use several months. Indeed as a place to save and send money, from JFK International Airport to other places, to be exact once a month. That there are millions of dollars, that are said to enter the airport to the Lufthansa terminal, then after transiting at JFK, then sent back to West Germany, to government activities. And all this information was conveyed by Louis Werner, said the Krugman, who indeed was a worker from JFK International Airport. Because this Louis Werner, has Krugman's gambling debt, was about $20,000, so this information, was used as a payment for him. This is guaranteed to be a mission which may be done, with a fairly short time, because indeed Louis Werner as an informant, he has also done it himself, and he managed to steal $22,000 from Lufthansa storage vault Lufthansa terminal, after hearing this information, of course as the mafia is excited. Get that kind of money, and of course he agreed with the robbery plan. And for how many months, they did extract information, and of course from people who worked also at JFK International Airport. Of course, in a way that money is certainly, starting from the flow of airport work, such as where they have to park the car, the right time to do this mission, and of course how long can be spent inside the Lufthansa terminal before the police suspect. While searching for information, Jimmy also formed a very large team, consisting of many mafias. And of course from some families as well. That the most important thing is actually the driver. He became a key actor in the case, namely Partnell Stax Edwards, who indeed tasked to be able to deliver and pick up the Lufthansa team later. And also in addition to Partnell himself, there is actually also Jimmy's own son, Frank Burke, who was assigned to be a driver of the crash car, or car is indeed on duty to later, hit the police car, if the police again come to the scene. It's his job to slow down, so that the team can get out first. If for example, it is needed. Jimmy Burge also provide a Ford Econoline, so this was a stolen van as well. As it cannot be detected more easily, and indeed that is the car that will be carried by Partnell Stax Edwards to deliver the Lufthansa team. How many people are like Paul Vario, who was also a friend of Jimmy's, also sent his son alone, to be sure success of this robbery. Then there's Vincent Acero, who finally did, in representatives of the De Bonanno family region, because it is the point of occurrence, or JFK International Airport, is in the De Bonanno family. That's why this family has to get apart. And of course Jimmy Burke as the mastermind, is just monitoring from afar. And make sure, none of his team is in danger, the biggest robbery to be carried out. After all the preparation ready, on December 11, 1978, the van that Edward brought with him, 6 people who became the Lufthansa Heist team, were parked in front of Lufthansa terminal, precisely at 3:12 a.m. Then they cut the wire fence, that became the door, to be able to enter the van. Then, because there was a suspicious sound, a cargo agent employee, named Kerry Warren, who was on duty, approached the car. Then suddenly, he was immediately dragged to in the van. He was punched and threatened also, that if he could not be cooperative, they would be killed all of his family. Because his wallet was taken. So they already know where he stay. Because of being threatened also, Kerry Warren finally surrendered. And besides Kerry Warren, there's actually one more officer. Heard the incident. But before he could get to the van, it has been ambushed by 6 people who became the Lufthansa Heist team, with the ski mask. Ended up in the van as well. After attacking the last officer to see them, they directly to the loading dock with the van, and opened the terminal building door, with the key provided by Lewis Warren, who is also an officer of JFK International Airports. Of course, he can get a duplicate of the key. After entering the terminal via loading dock, they immediately led all the employees there, who worked in the cargo, into one room, while pointing the gun, also beat Kerry Warren, who had been arrested by them, to prove that they were not play games, and if you, for example, doing something suspicious, will be immediately killed. After all the employees gathered in one room, while being held at gunpoint, as well as one senior employee, it was called, to be able to call a man named Rudy Ilrich, as the only Louis Werner is the only person. It can open 2 storage doors from Lufthansa. After Rudy Ilrich finally managed to be called, by deception, that there is a problem of technical constraints below, in cargo. Finally, Rudy came, and was immediately at gunpoint, and Rudyard here inevitably opened the storage room, and indeed, the storage room is quite safe, because if you open the first door, the second door cannot be opened. So the first door must open, and then enter a compartment in the middle and immediately close first, the first door, then the second door can only be opened. Louis Karen also said that, this Lufthansa fold would be the most dangerous point. Because, for example, if you make a mistake or there is reporting just a little or anyway sign. He said, Lufthansa fold, or JFK International Airport, it would be locked down. And within 90 seconds. At least you can't escape anymore. So Rudy was brought to Lufthansa fold, and held so as not to do strange things, and they can still lead them to take all the money inside. Therefore, finally they also managed to take 40 packages, with enough smoothly from the safe, get out, and at 4:16, all the stolen packages are already enter the van, is parked in loading dock. Then ask the employees collected in the room, for asking to call the police at 4:30, give them at least 15 minutes vague. So they want to do a show off, as well for the robbery. And in just 64 minutes, or an hour less. Lufthansa Heist is the biggest robbery. Whatever happened in America? They managed to solve. They stole $6 million, 1 million of which was in the form of jewelry or diamonds, and 5 million more was in the form of cash. Its equivalent value in 2019, $23 million. A robbery that is considered perfect, because it didn't leave any traces at all, because after the police came, It was just right. The time when they were gone from the region was far away. So it's been. There is no evidence or signs at all. Well, it turned out to be a case of robbery. That perfect, it's not perfect. Because on December 13th, 978, the police received a call from someone who reported a suspicious van parked in the no parking area. As if it were intentional. Looking for attention, and when the police come and see the police getting suspicious. It's like a van. Defined by Lufthansa employees who was on duty at night, from Lufthansa Heist, and it was very similar. Finally police investigate the van, then found the fingerprints of Parnell Edwards. He was the key of this Lufthansa case, became very bloody. The next step is of course, to be able to find where Edward is, and of course interrogate Edwards, but unfortunately the police, they couldn't find Edwards, because Edwards had been killed by two people who were ordered by Jimmy Burke. And the two men who were close to Edwards, even to the point of being like his friend. Precisely early in the morning these two people were sent to knock the door of Edwards' house. Where it is his hiding house, the house of Edward's girlfriend. Because Edwards already knew that he was being sought by the police, because fingerprints were found in the van he was wearing at Lufthansa Heist. After two people were allowed to enter, Edward continued to feel that they were his friends, and the two were instantly kill Edward with silencer guns. Edward's body was found by his wife, after his wife returned home from the supermarket. Edwards was unable to carry out his duties properly at Lufthansa Heist because it was Edward should have been tasked with destroying the car after Lufthansa Heist or after his team was out the van. But instead of destroying the van, indeed as very dangerous evidence after the robbery, instead he went to his girlfriend's house using the van, then parked in a place that was prohibited from parking and because after he went down, he took drugs and drank, finally it became also forgotten that he had left the van without being destroyed first. Just like Jimmy Burke ordered. After the name of Edwards in the police, of course Jimmy Burke was worried. That's why he killed Edward as soon as possible, before the police could find him. After Edward's fingerprints were found, it was said that Jimmy Burke was there is a very high level of disquiet, says Henry Hills as a friend of Jimmy Burke. And Jimmy Burke was well aware that it seemed like the FBI had helped, and he was sure he was right. If the FBI had intervened, in the next few days there would have been many names revealed, and could eventually link to his name, and he would have been arrested as well. Jimmy Burke he finally made a plan that he would kill everyone related to Lufthansa Heist, including Krugman and others. And it was said to Henry Hill as his best friend. After the plan was declared, indeed many people who eventually died and disappeared who were indeed bodies scattered everywhere. In his apartment, in the car, the refrigerator, in the trash can and elsewhere. For 6 months after the robbery, almost all of the names related to Lufthansa Heist it's all dead. Even his son. Frank Burke is the man who was assigned to be a crash car, that too. Lost or dead and out of nowhere. And it said maybe killed by Jimmy Burke, or Jimmy Burke told someone else to kill his own son, to eliminate the slightest trace of him in Lufthansa Heist. And because of all that involved as well, dead, So there's no more names that could link to Jimmy Burke, because Edwards was so far away for a link to Jimmy Burke's name. So because everyone is dead, and cannot be interrogated, so there is no more evidence that can link his name to the name Lufthansa Heist. So Jimmy Burke is very, very safe. Indeed, what was caught finally was just Louis Werner, airport officer who provided information, and was indeed charged because it has provided information related to Lufthansa Volts and was prosecuted for 15 years in May 1979. And because he got it to Krugman, and Krugman was dead. Jimmy Burke can't be accused either. In 1980, Henry Hillett was arrested on drug traffickers, not because of Lufthansa Heist but because of drug sellers. And because after being arrested, he was afraid that maybe Jimmy Burke could suspect him, that he would open his mouth in the police after being arrested. And will give the name Jimmy Burke and open the case Lufthansa Heist, so Henry Hill has disquiet that he must protect himself by registering himself as a witness. The names are related to Lufthansa Heist. One of them is Jimmy Burke. And finally, indeed, after he had already become an FBI informant. Also now it has been lost somewhere, because it may have been changed also its identity. Jimmy Burke and Paul Vario were finally on the FBI list, as two people. Name, which became the mastermind of Lufthansa Heist, but strangely these two guys, Jimmy Burke and Paul Vario, they were arrested not because of the Lufthansa Heist robbery but they were both arrested for other criminal cases, both of which eventually died in prison. Paul Vario in 1988 and Jimmy Burke in 1996. And until this moment it is still a mystery, that actually who became the mastermind, and still save money from Lufthansa Heist, which is so big, because actually after this incident, there are actually some family members from the mafia, the Italian mafia, also briefly arrested, and finally released because it was considered not linked with Lufthansa Heist. But actually if asked again, actually Jimmy Burke still keeps the names, that it is actually the real mastermind of this Lufthansa Heist. That's the case with Lufthansa Heist. This is the biggest robbery to take place in America. It's great, and if you read it, and listen to my story carefully, maybe you can visualize how sadistic the way the mafia works, where your own friends can be killed for your own safety. So it's really scary, and if you want to watch the video, Goodfellas is the best movie to be able to. It represents the story, and how sadistic Jimmy Burke killed, one by one, his friends, because if in the movie it was seen how he killing them. But it's a lot of dramatization, so it's not unusual, for what's happening in the real case. But at least it can show how sadistic Jimmy Burke is, and how cold-blooded he was in planning all the murders of his friends. He even gathers with him, every day in his lounge. Such is the story I can tell you about the Lufthansa Heist case. May it comfort you. Do not forget to like, share and subscribe it. See you in another interesting story.